Good afternoon. No? Good morning, everybody. Welcome. Very nice to see you all. So I'm Sara Maggioni. I'm the Director of Retail and Buying at WGSN. We're based in London. And today I'm going to take you through some of the key trends for 2020. So we're going to start with our macro trends. The macro trends are kind of like our initial part of the research. So it's much more conceptual. At this stage, we're looking at consumer insight. We're looking at technology, science, politics, socio-economic shifts. And so we're looking at how all of that is going to shape the product that we'll be wearing and buying in 2 years' time. Then we're going to look at some of the key stories within each macro trend. And then we're going to take a look at some of the key materials. And finally, we'll close with some of the key items. So without further ado, I'm going to sit down. Sorry, I'm just, how do I... Okay. Can everyone hear me? Yeah? Okay, so starting with macro trends, we have 3 overarching themes for 2020. They are code create, empower up, and design emotion. So as I was saying, they really kind of provide the conceptual direction to set the tone and mood of the season. We're going to take a look in a little bit more detail. Let's start with code create. So code create is our most futuristic trend. It very much centers around the rise of big data. Sorry, I'm just having... Più lontana? Okay. It centers around the concept of big data, the rise of artificial intelligence, also the DNA economy, and how all of this is going to infiltrate and influence our lives. So really, this is inspired by advances in science and technology and how they will help us rewrite the code. This is why it's called Code Create. It will help us rewrite the code on how we design product and how we buy product as well. I have a short video just to kind of get you in the mood, just to kind of get the concept, clarify the concept. So data is all around us, whether we like it or not. This is just a reality. And so from a strategy viewpoint, what does it mean? So we are seeing rising technologies like artificial intelligence that will enable a new level of personalization. So really, this is about precision product. This example is Yoox, so 8 by Yoox. They launched their first private label, and it's all completely powered by AI, artificial intelligence, but designed by the Yoox design team. So it's just the kind of, the AI tools that they combine. They're scraping the internet, they're combining customer feedback, their own sales data, predictive trends, etc., etc. I'm going to play the video so we can really understand what Code Create is all about. About this is that it shows how new technologies, so artificial intelligence, can also really help with the concept of sustainability, which is obviously it's not a trend, it's one of the biggest challenges of our lives at the moment. And so it can really help how to also cut overstock. Overstock is a huge problem, and so it's this idea of combining technology to kind of tackle these issues as well. So what does it mean for fashion? how does this code create trend translate into fashion product? As I was saying, it's quite futuristic, so it really taps into futuristic aesthetics, innovative materials. It's 2020 after all, and really, but it's still quite grounded by a sense of reality and practicality. So some of the action points: explore nature. As the consumer's interest in sustainability continues, then we are going to see this kind of more interest in nature and sustainable materials, biodegradable materials, but mixed with synthetics, particularly sustainable synthetics. Be inspired by science fiction. Challenge material perception. So again, it's about like exploring new textures and embracing future sports styles. So obviously 2020 is also when the Tokyo Olympics are going to be on. And so we are going to see high performance sports really continuing as a key influence for product. Taking a look at the color palette, it's a palette of contrast and versatility. It's very much rooted in nature, but then at the same time, it's quite digital in its saturation. It's almost digital. So some of the brights, we have Hot Tiger Lily and Fierce Magenta. They work as statement accent against more familiar tones, such as Rosewood and Summer Cinnamon. So you can really see how this palette really spans the season, all the way from transitional deliveries and all the way to high summer. Now let's take a look at some of the sub-stories. So for each macro trend, we have the big topics of the seasons, the big overriding messages, and then we have sub-stories. So we start designing for that particular word, I would say, or concept. And so some of the sub-stories, we have digitized materials, so it's very futuristic, but at the same time, it's still quite glam, it's still quite feminine, it's still quite sophisticated. Think about exploring crystal cover constructions, but also semi-gloss finishes, film finishes, and use them on simple shapes. So again, it's quite futuristic, but again, it's quite pared back at the same time. So it's very wearable. We then have the sports, as I was saying. So from digital design, and this is inspired by digital design and biodesign technology. Again, it's a futuristic feel, but it's very much embedded in commerciality. So think about color blocking, blocked panels, mismatched materials to really tap into that more commercial vibe to it. Experiment with pearlized tones and also iridescent textures. And then, as I was saying, as consumers continue to explore sustainable solutions, it's still very much, as I was saying, it's something that it's not a trend. We can't ignore it anymore. And so nature will inspire this nature-facing, this kind of more future-facing direction for materials. And so it's really very much about combining materials, natural materials, with more sustainable synthetics. Here we have semi-precious and natural stones that are used for both components and decorations. But also we have a couple of examples of how dried flowers are incorporated, are wrapped into these plastics and also into resin. They are encapsulated in resin. It's, I have an example here. It's Regina Weber. She was one of the finalists at Years. Of course, this is not eyewear, this is apparel, but it's just to give you an idea. And she entraps these pressed flowers with silicone, almost in a bid to stop time. But again, you can really see how this can work for accessories and eyewear. Obviously, for a more commercial take to it, think about print, nature-inspired graphics. And then again, future sports. So as I was saying, performance silhouettes continue to have a core influence for 2020, but they are updated with this more futuristic slant. So again, blocked panels, really, really key. Use acetate, see-through resin to tap into the trend for transparencies, which continues to do well. And also utility hardware, but you can really see how it can be used here for both lenses and frames with this iridescence and really kind of bright pops of colors. And then we have this near future aesthetic. So it's a futuristic silhouette which has a very sharp, edgy, and kind of surreal quality. And profiles are minimal here, But again, we have these characteristics of industrial hardware and this used with these futuristic synthetic materials as well. Like the first trend we saw, this is, yes, it's futuristic, it's contemporary, but at the same time, it's quite pared back. So Code Create is not about this like super science fiction that is completely unwearable, but it's about taking these elements and making them and kind of filtering them down and making them commercial. So here you can really see how it's used, again, pearlicized finishes, but also these pastels, again, for that really contemporary take. And then we have these abnormal surfaces combined with more polished and mirrored finishes. It's a little bit more offbeat, it's a little bit more experimental. But again, look at repurposed fabrics, metallic textures, sleek resins. And in terms of color, gold and silver are combined with black and white for a more futuristic approach. But again, to keep it a little bit more wearable, to keep it a little bit more accessible, think about pearlescent and iridescent tones. So it's only slightly subtle. Now, that was it for Code Create. So again, some of the key takeaways is quite futuristic, but again, it's still quite practical. It's very much based on nature and also sports, high-performance sports, really, really key. Let's move on to our second macro trend, which is called Empower Up. It's a very youthful, it's a very upbeat trend, and it's very much inspired by this kind of sense of vitality and change that is emerging. So just to give you a little bit of cultural context, because this is what we do, when we, as I was saying at the beginning of the presentation, when we come up with these names, I know they sound quite abstract, but obviously there is always a sociological study behind everything. And just to give you a little bit of cultural context here, so we are seeing ethnic and racial identifiers changing. This is across the world. So what we are seeing is that former minorities are now going to become new majorities. So really is about this new consumer emerging. Again, just to give you some stats, just in Italy, since 2011, we've seen an increase of interracial marriages of 172%. And by 2040, which is, I know is in 20 years' time, but by 2040, the Caucasian race is going to be a minority in the US. So we are seeing this new consumer really shaping up, and we need to be prepared for it, because with that, the voices of power are also going to change. The other key factor of Empower Up is the youth, so particularly Generation Z. So Generation Z is the generation born between 1995 and 2012. They are digital natives. They don't know a world without the internet. They are used to get everything at the click of a button. And they're shaping up to be the most open-minded, self-aware, and health-conscious generation yet. They're the most diverse and inclusive generation, and they really value diversity and inclusivity the most. So these new consumers that are coming, what they're going to do, why am I telling you, is because they're going to force brands to really rethink their strategies. And so topics like sustainability, ethics, social conscience is really, really important to them. They will vote with their wallet. They will want to side with brands that really they share the same values with. I have another video. Again, I put for each macro trend, I put a little video just to kind of encapsulate the mood a little bit. This is from Nike Mexico, Nike Women Mexico. It's called Juntas Imparables, so Unstoppable Together. And again, it's not about eyewear, but it's really to it really captures the spirit of Empower Up. So Mexico is a country that is quite famous for its macho culture. And so the idea here is to really understand how women can get together and how powerful they can be together. So it's about empowering women in a country that is predominantly led by males. Let's take a look.
Un embotellamiento apocalíptico ha causado que la Ciudad de México... ¡Es que se te ve más bonito esto en serio!
¡Mamá, ya!
¿Qué estás haciendo? ¡Ven, bájate, bájate, bájate!
¡Vámonos! Yo soy mala, que lo que tú dices, tú no dices nada. Vamos pa' la súbanse a esos carros.
But as you can see, it's really empowering. It's a very empowering mood, and I thought it really captures very well what Empower Up is about. It's about sticking together, it's about collaboration, and it's about standing for something you believe in. Also, the color palette is super Empower Up. We're going to see it in a minute. So just to tell you, what does this mean for fashion? How does this translate to fashion? It's our most youthful and fashion-led macro trend for the season. It's very much celebrating individuality, diversity, and also subcultures, and also this kind of more global appeal that I was talking about. So product takes on a more optimistic and very upbeat feel. Some of the action points you can see here. So be inspired by summer vacations. Of course, when we think about happy times, about kind of vibrant colors, we think about holidays. So summer vacations, a big reference for it, particularly Miami lifestyle influences. Evolve maximalism themes. So maximalism, we are seeing a rise in minimalism. I'll talk about that in a bit. But maximalism is still very much there, still very much alive and kicking. And so if you have a customer that bought into that, it continues, and it's about really amping it up a bit. Embrace sustainability. So of course, for this cohort, sustainability, as I was saying, it's key. Sorry for keep banging on about it, but again, I know it's a big topic here at Mido as well, because it's good that the industry, everyone is really kind of waking up to it, and we can't ignore it anymore. And so it's a really big concept that I'm going to repeat throughout the presentation. And so think about investing in bioplastics, but also upcycled vintage components for kind of more one-of-a-kind pieces, which tap into that individuality. And again, vintage, embrace vintage references, particularly kind of elevated glamour and vintage pool accessories. Let's take a look at the color palette. It's a very summery palette, as I was saying. It's with plenty of these upbeat mid-tones. Some of the key colors to mention here are cassis, cantaloupe, and neomint. You can see them here. They are 3 of our 5 top colors for 2020, but they are counterbalanced by essential tones such as russet and watercress. Now let's take a look at some of the sub-stories like we did for Code Create. We have this kitsch floral story. So as I was saying, the continued focus on maximalism carries on. And here we can see flower embellishment in larger scales. So really it's about amping up the look a little bit. So 3D applications, floral applications, but also think about glitters, beading, decorative acrylics. And of course, all over applications tap into that kitsch, vintage mood that some customers really like. Otherwise, think about placement, a single placement for more statement accessories. This is for your fashion customer. This is for your, what the colleagues called earlier, the fashion-hungry customer. Sorry if I got the name wrong. But it's that younger consumer, is that consumer who really want to stand out. It's not a volume item. And then I was talking about retro references. So we have this elevated glamour, vintage accessories, vintage pool accessories, retro holiday themes. They really come to the fore here. It's a pretty commercial trend, actually. We are quite familiar with it. We've seen this before, and it returns in quite a big way. Again, think about injecting those pastel colors, those cassis, those cantaloupe, those mint greens. They're coming to the fore for both lenses and frames as well. And surf, if we think about sports, of course, surf remains a key reference. Oops. Yep. Skip too far. Yeah, so surf remains a key reference. Look to popular surf brands from the 90s to inspire print, trims, and also details. Again, you can really see how this is a good update for your sport shields, and use this kind of really like washed brights and more dynamics color. So again, with this iridescence coming to the fore. Ombre, so take inspirations from the colors of retro vacations for these brightly colored ombre effects, particularly for hardware components. And again, it's about evolving glowing accents for componentry, but also, as you can see for the top, the brow bar, and also for your temple bars as well. The brow line and the temple bars, you can really play with this ombre and iridescent finishes in this super bright spectrum of colors. And then we have elevated plastics. So plastics will be updated with a more tactile and organic feel for a more premium looks. Obviously, the consumer perception for plastic is changing a little bit. We are much more aware of plastic. We are much more aware of, the damage that it is doing. And so plastic is kind of being seen in a different way. So we're kind of valuing, if you're going to do plastic, we're kind of valuing a lot more than in the past. So we are trying to really reduce usage to limit environmental damage. So here, think about, particularly for your premium styles, think about using bioplastics. They will offer a sustainable solution. So gelatin, algae, and agar-based ingredients, they're all really key for bioplastics. And they offer this kind of translucent and more rubber-like quality. And also consider corn-based biopolymers. They can be sourced as a natural byproduct of the field corn industry. So again, it's about kind of looking at that recycled materials and how we can use it to make a beautiful styles. And then finally, for this trend, we have over-the-top crystals, beading, pavé applications. They continue to play into the relevance of dress-up looks. Again, it's another way of doing maximalism. It's maximalism, but it's a little bit more glam. It's a little bit more for evening wear. And obviously, it's a statement look. Again, it's not your volume item. But it's important to note that the commercial appeal, the commercial acceptance of this look really grows. And so we will see coming through a lot more, particularly in line with high-low styling, so mixing genres, cross-pollination of genres, which continues to be a key message for the season. Now, let's move on to our final macro trend, which is designing emotion. And it very much explores how tech and craftsmanship can go hand in hand to create products that really celebrates imperfection, but also how that can offer a kind of deeper post-purchase connection with an item. So by this, what I mean is that we are buying less. We're buying less. This is just a fact. We're buying less product. We are seeing more overstock. And as I was saying, the new generation, we are thinking about what we buy a lot more than in the past. This is not going to happen overnight, but we are seeing these shifts. We are tracking these shifts. And so it's really important for designers to almost like design emotions, design products that can stimulate an emotion for the consumer to get more attached to the product. So also, just some stats. We are realizing how important the human aspect is. We are completely overrun by technology, but the whole idea is that technology, we still very much need the human element. And so the World Economic Forum has actually listed emotional intelligence as a key job skills for the future, for the fourth industrial revolution. Just some stats. Employees with high EQ, so emotional quotient, are typically better performer, and people with a high degree of emotional intelligence make more money. So we are really seeing that it's not all about technology, and the human aspect is it's absolutely paramount. So essentially, as humans become more digital, technology will have to become more human. So what we're seeing a lot of designers experimenting with it and really trying to almost give technology a soul and designing with that in mind. So, and also it's really about celebrating the imperfection of being a human. I know it sounds really futuristic, but it really makes sense as a concept, particularly for experiences. I have another little video here. It's from the Milan Design Week last year. Some of you might have seen it already, and it's by Sony. So Sony obviously is a tech company, But you can really see how this can be translated into product as well, with that idea of like creating that connection with the product. So in this video, you are going to see some, so basically they have added tech-driven superpowers to everyday objects. So gesture controls, sensory technology, to really bring shadows to life, to spring photos on the wall. And really it's about creating this moment of magic. It's really about using technology to enhance our lives, rather than, we've become all technophobic a little bit. Like a lot of us are kind of scared of technology, but this idea is to use technology in a more responsible way and use it to really enhance what we already have. Let's take a look. Of how, as I was saying, technology can be used to enrich and to kind of put a sensorial experience into our everyday objects. Now, what does this mean for fashion? So obviously this is a big trend for in-store campaigns, for marketing, for your social media campaigns. But again, what does this mean for fashion? So as I was saying, it's about really embracing that more imperfect side of it, that more kind of handcrafted feel. Some of the action points: elevate everyday staples, so use these quality materials to give that real timeless appeal. So for those items that will last longer. Embrace the beauty of texture and imperfection. So as I was saying, handmade finishes, really, really key. But also it's about giving that more unique quality. Add elegance to vacation drops. So again, it's really about using pastels. And again, we'll see the color palette in a minute, but it's about tapping into the idea of nostalgia. So if we think about emotions, nostalgia is still a big, let's call it trend, but it's not so much of a trend, it's like a sentiment, right? And so nostalgia is still really key, and so it's about really tapping into those retro references. And of course, focus on natural and sustainable materials. So again, really experiment with repurposed materials to create one-of-a-kind pieces. The color palette. Designing Emotion features a very feel-good palette with this clean, very comforting mid-tones. It's got this retro feel to it, as I was saying. It's a very feel-good palette, and let's point out some of the colors for translucent frames. So translucent frames are quite a big theme for the season. We have the first two, Palo Santo and Birch. They're really good for both lenses and frames, but also faded cargo at the end. And then some of the fashion colors to be aware of. Purest Blue, it's another of the 5 key fashion key colors for 2020 that I was mentioned before, so together with mint, neo mint, cassis, and cantaloupe. Retro tones of orange and yellow. So orange and yellow have been big, massive, particularly with Generation Z. Something that I really liked is that, talking about Generation Z, if we talk about the guys in America that were fighting the March for Our Lives, so they were fighting gun control, last year, they decided to use orange as their color, because orange is the color that you normally use in hunting. So when you want to be seen, when you don't want to be shot. And so they decided to use that to protest gun control, gun reforms. And so it's just really interesting how the new generation, Generation Z in particular, are really looking at the meaning of color. It's not just a fashion choice. So yellow and orange continue, but again, it's not so in your face, it's not so bright and punchy, it's a little bit more toned down, it's a little bit more retro. And then pink continues as well, same, it's not your kind of bubblegum millennial pink, but it's a little bit more, it's a little bit softer. Let's look at some of the sub-stories. We have this ephemeral romance, so use sculptural forms and contrast materials to really add depth to a more minimalist aesthetic. And so really create this subtle color effect with this marbled and again pearlescent finishes in different tones. And you can really tap into that nostalgic mood with pearlized finishes. Of course, pastels, as you can see here, is a big one for this. And then powering the senses. So this story is very much what we were talking about, what we saw in the video. It's very much kind of exploring designs that incorporate technology to work together with human senses. So some of the key areas that designers are exploring include 4D and 3D printing, body heat and movement, so kind of like designs that respond to body heat and movement, lab-grown materials, to preserve our natural resources, coated metals and twist lock mechanisms. And of course, I cannot mention smart glasses here, so augmented reality glasses. I know that we had, Google glasses, we had Snap glasses, they really flopped. It's fair to say that, but this is still a key area of development. It's huge. Why am I telling you? I know that this is from the big tech companies, but of course, plenty of opportunities for partnerships with eyewear brands who actually know how to make eyewear. So it's this idea of cross-industry collaborations as well. And then talking about repurposed materials, still very important, so consider using leftover materials and hardware, not only to kind of tap into that sustainable angle, but also to create this more meaningful connection between the items. So it's about having items with a story, really. And think about mixing different fabrics and trims to create these clashing patterns and textures. And for a more commercial appeal, of course, think about applying this to more simple and kind of classic silhouettes. You can also tap into the importance of personalization. You can, by really almost collaborating with your customer, so on a kind of one-to-one basis. So it's something to think about for these more DIY pieces. And then we talked about imperfection. So this whole idea of imperfection and this shonky aesthetic, it's really emerging. So again, imperfect designs reflect more truly how people think. It's much more inclusive. We are surrounded by perfection. We are surrounded by the Insta world, by kind of, this whole idea of being perfect all the time. And we are seeing, again, to tap into this more kind of cultural context, we are seeing depression levels at an all-time high at the moment. And so how do you counterbalance that? It's this idea that actually even the new generation, they are looking at something different. They want to move on from that because it has created so many problems. And so here, from a design point of view, use these delicate structures to shape metallics, and also it's quite fluid, it's quite offbeat, and also worn and warped finishes to really add depth and texture to designs. So it's really about playing with the contrast between abnormal details, but at the same time, perfect technical finishes. So it's this connection of the two, technology and something imperfect. And then Wellness Wanderer. So we have a lot of familiar and comfortable items. They're very much elevated here with materials such as transparent plastics, wood, barely dull metals, blown rubbers. And again, it's really about playing with your components. So again, material contrast will add depth to this more utility-driven and minimalist shapes. Let's now take a look at some of the solid materials. We picked out 6 key components for 2020. We're going to start with antique gold. If I can get the slice there, yeah. So yellow gold continues to have mass appeal for both men and women. And so here we can see these more dull and textured finishes. They've got this worn, really kind of aged feel to it. And it will resonate particularly well with, it will work really well into the whole renewed interest in vintage. So vintage is actually quite a big reference, quite a big influence across the season. We are seeing a lot of style-conscious people, because everything with Instagram as well, everything looks quite samey now. We're actually seeing a lot of younger people, a lot of tastemakers, a lot of influencers moving back into vintage to really create that, to really find that one-of-a-kind piece. And so Also, so much so that actually, just to give you some stats, by 2027, the resale market is going to take over fast fashion. So vintage is definitely a big inspiration. We're seeing a lot of resale companies, websites coming to the fore. And so leverage vintage as an inspiration. So vintage inspired looks really quite key. Now, the trend for oversized statement-making glasses is kind of more accessories, is kind of counterbalanced by this return to a restrained minimalism, as I kind of mentioned earlier, just touched on it very quickly. And so you can really use these barely there metals as, you can have fine gauge chains, but also lightweight metal wire to really tap into this trend. And again, we've seen pearls being particularly big for accessories in the past couple of seasons. This continues, but we have this pearlized solid materials that range from synthetic acetate through to natural mother of pearl, higher price points. And so consider incorporating color as well, so it's not just the normal mother of pearl, pearlescent finishes, but also these carved shapes. They are set to be a key driver for this direction. And coated metals. So consumer continue to be quite brave with embracing color. We have actually seen, with maximalism in particular, we have seen an uptake of color. We use data as well. We use retail analytics, and we have seen, even across retail analytics, we have seen brighter colors selling a lot more, a lot faster than in previous years. So here it continues that. So update lightweight titanium and stainless steel with the seasonal colors. Neo mint, again, one of the ones to watch. But again, it's not so in your face. It's still very sophisticated. So it's still a very pared back mood. And lab-grown diamonds. So as I was saying, consumers are becoming increasingly motivated by making sustainable choices. And so we are seeing the demand for lab-grown diamonds growing. This is obviously more for the fine jewelry market, but of course as well for eyewear components, really, really key to think about. So they are 30% cheaper than mined diamonds. So it's, we're going to see these large-scale stones that are going to uptrend. And then upcycle components, we kind of talked about it a little bit already, but it's really about repurposing materials for this more innovative approach to sustainability. So explore designs that use reclaimed materials in more creative ways. So work creatively with your waste and recycle fine metals and kind of move them and create new pieces with it. As I was saying, renewed plastics or bioplastics as well, really important. And again, think about these cross-industry collaborations because we can't do it all by ourselves. Again, it's really about that collaborative mood continuing. And now we're going to look at some of the key items of the season. We have 9. Let's start with sorry guys, I'm not really good with the clicker. Let's start with the Barely There Aviator. So the perennial aviator is updated in these Barely There designs. Adds the demand for, as I was saying, minimalism is coming back. Maximalism is still there, but we are also seeing minimalism coming back in a big way. This is not just for eyewear, this is across the board. We are seeing this for apparel as well. But also, the other key driver to this is comfort. We've grown so used to comfort, obviously with wearing sneakers a lot more, with this kind of more looser silhouettes. And so this lightweight, frameless design and ultra-fine frames are really, really comfortable and really, really light. It's a unisex style. It's very versatile. It's got this all year round appeal. And think about acetate, crystal acetate frames to, again, tap into those transparencies, but also subtle tinted lenses will add versatility. So this is a really key item. It's just like how we're seeing how some of our core items are moving towards, so this more minimal and really barely there aesthetic. The retro square, it carries through. It's so one of the key influences of the season. What I would say the main message for key items is that We have seen narrower profiles and streamlined profiles and even the micro kind of profiles doing really well in the past couple of seasons from a fashion viewpoint. I'm not talking about cores, I'm talking more about fashion. And they will carry on, but we are also seeing this kind of larger frames coming back. Vintage reference are key, particularly the 70s and the noughties. And here you can really see how this 70s looks kind of cinematic. They continue to do well at commercial level. They were kicked off initially, let's say it's fair to say, by Gucci with the old geek chic aesthetic. They carry on. And it's a really familiar look, so it's a really good item to reintroduce this oversized frames into your customer because it's a familiar look to your customer. Think about tinted lenses as well, but this taupe and really soft browns, they have this really retro quality and feels quite new for eyewear, for lenses in particular, and also about these monocolor statements coming back. Rimless, geometric, and fine wire profiles will be particularly directional for opticals. The cat eye. Sorry. There, okay. The cat eye, so I saw the colleagues talking about the cat eye before. They do particularly well in certain countries, but they are a very commercial item. They've grown to be a very commercial item. They continue, but what we are seeing here, we are seeing these more angular designs updating. So they're almost, again, if we think about the influence of those narrower profiles, we can really see how they are having an impact on cat eyes as well. So it's almost like a hybrid between the two. What's interesting is that the cat eye is normally a very feminine look, but because of these angular silhouettes, it becomes much more unisex. So think about black acetate frames to tap into the younger men market as well. They will work for both optical and sunglasses. And how can you update them? Think about adding flashes of colors to accentuate the brow line, but also all over prints, pave details, pave crystals, pearlized finishes for statement youth ranges. And then the bug eye, so this is very much associated with the noughties. The noughties has been quite an untapped era so far. It's been all about the 80s, it's been all about the 90s. We haven't seen the noughties so much. But we are seeing a lot of emerging designers. We are seeing a lot of again, with the return to vintage, the youth really channeling this trend. Is becoming quite a big reference. It's quite directional, so it will work particularly for your younger market, particularly around festival drops. And think about balancing the oversized proportions with this more light and color-tinted lenses. And this is a nice evolution. It evolves the wraparound shield, sports shield styles that we've seen previously. So it's not a volume item, but it should definitely be on your radar. And then we have the extended rectangle. So as I was saying before, we've had many seasons of more circular, focused on more circular shapes. Of course, they also carry on, but we are seeing these more angular silhouettes coming back. They took a little bit of a backseat for a while, and they are coming back in quite a big way. They're having a little bit more of a renaissance now in this kind of angular designs. So here we have this more extended one, which offers a bit of a play on proportions. It's very versatile. It works for both street and formal looks. And again, you can do it as a monocolor look, but also for your more fashion pieces, think about that contrast with your fashion colors of the season. And the wide temple bar is another key update for the contemporary market. And then the XXL frame, so proportions, so I was talking about the micro proportions, now we're going in the completely opposite direction. So we have these extra large frames coming back, also quite 90s, end of 90s noughties, quite directional. It's just for sunglasses, not so much for opticals, but it's got this note to feel to it. And again, temple bars are much wider. So again, it kind of continues that shield wrapping, enveloping look. And also the reflective shield. Even though I was saying that extra large proportions are coming back, we are definitely still seeing the consumer appetite for these more streamlined silhouettes. These ones, they really tap into the futuristic code create themes that we were talking about before, particularly when we combine the reflective lenses with lightweight wires as well. And so this is a perfect example of a trend that comes from both high-end and the street, so a trend that is trickling down from the catwalks, but also bubbling up from the street. It's coming in from both directions, let's say, and it will work for both young men and women. And then the demi-frame. The demi-frame, it features these more unexpected constructions, and it taps into that individuality that we were talking about, so for that consumer that wants to stand out a little bit. And it's a really good seasonal update for both the cat eye, but also these extra large proportions. You can see how the frame is both at the top, which is a little bit more commercial, but you can also play with it and maybe put it at the bottom. And decorative temple bars and color-tinted lenses are key. And then finally, we have the round neutral tinted lenses. So as I was saying, rounds from a fashion viewpoint, this is not for opticals, more for sunglasses. From a fashion viewpoint, these round frames, they've been so big for so many seasons, and now they will continue because they are super commercial, but we are seeing a shift. However, for this one, the main message, the main update is that we're moving away from the very graphic color pop versions that we've previously seen, and we're moving towards this more natural direction. So really think about those kind of lenses, tinted lenses in honey, cognac, smoky cast neutrals. They really tap into the season's retro undercurrents. So it's not so much about creating a statement, but it's about really tapping into that more pared back mood, and again, comfort, because they are also really, really lightweight. It's a volume item. It will transcend all markets. It will work across the board. Antique gold fine wires, again, for that customer that buys into that vintage look, but also with the return to oversized proportion, think about amping them up a little bit and make them kind of like more supersized. Another important thing to kind of look out for is, because it's such a simple silhouette, think about sunglasses chains. So we are seeing them coming back as a key accessories, particularly around festival or around resorts wear collection, because they work as both, they double up as both a practical and a fashion-led detail. So this is it from me. Thank you so much, everyone. I hope you found it interesting and inspiring. I'm not sure if we have time for a Q&A. I'm not sure. If there is any question, I'm more than happy to reply. Otherwise, thank you very much, everybody. It's great to see you all.